Welcome to the PowettPlay Podcast, where international cricketer Kieran, Powell and marketing genius Shannon join forces, bringing you captivating conversations with the biggest players in cricket and business. Join us as we dive into the lives of current stars in the cricketing world, the legends before them, and those extraordinary icons whose performances changed the game in both cricket and business. Exploring journeys both on and off the pitch, the boardroom, and everything in between. Get ready for an exhilarating blend of cricket, life, and business insights, with two insatiably passionate, infuriatingly no-holds-barred hosts, who, unfortunately for the rest of us, live and breathe this stuff for a living.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 51 of the PowettPlay Podcast. I'm your host, Shannon. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Kieran Powell. But today, we've got a very special guest, Mr. Shane Bond. How are you, Shane?
No, I'm good, thanks, boys.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on the channel today. In terms of obviously starting, I just wanted to sort of get your life in cricket, really. But how did it all start out? You love for the game?
Yeah, that's a good question. I started playing when I was 6, and I think it was the time around the underarm incident. You know, the coloured clothing one-day series stuff that was on TV over here, and a general loathing for Australia. And I was a pretty hyperactive kid, so full on. And then when I decided, well, I want to play cricket because I saw it on TV, my mum couldn't quite work it out because she thought, why does the most hyperactive kid want to play the most boring sport? So that was the start. And then my parents took me down to the local cricket club, and my mum just said I could always just bowl. That's what she said. It just sort of came naturally. So started when I was 6, and sort of been involved ever since. Loved it.
So when did you get picked up then by Canterbury? When did that start from that perspective?
I suppose the earliest rep teams were sort of like your last year at primary school, sort of when you're 12, 13.
Yeah.
And that it's funny enough, there's a lot of rep stuff getting removed now in sport over here. They're saying that it's not good for kids, but for me, it was the opposite experience. You play all through those young years. There were 2 teams picked for a South Island tournament. I made one of them and played for 5 days straight, right next to Hagley Oval, actually. And, when you look back, you go, you were playing, I played with Craig McMillan, Ryan Nelson, who was the New Zealand football captain, Anton Oliver, who was the New Zealand rugby captain, all these cricketers and players who, some of them are still my friends. And it was an awesome experience. And I suppose that was the start of it. And then as you progress through the age groups, 16s, 18s, 20s, I made teams, but you would never have said I was going to be an international player by no stretch of the imagination. So, I was good enough to make those teams. And, from my perspective, making those rep teams was, a hell of a lot of fun. And, because of the weather over here, the same in England, it's great for your development because you just got to play more cricket.
Yeah. In terms, like you mentioned there, some of the names, such as Ryan Nelson, professional footballer and stuff, mixing with those, was it always in terms of that competitive environment as well all the time, coming up through the rep cricket as well then?
I think when you're coming up through that stuff, you hear whispers of names of who's, Craig McMillan was always earmarked as a superstar. Kane Williamson, even, you'd heard at 10, 11 years old, you're like, this kid's coming through, he's going to be a gun. So there were certain names that were mentioned. Some guys went on and played for New Zealand and didn't really have, huge international careers, but they still made it. But, when you're playing just all your local cricket and then you get the chance to see what's in and around the country, when you play those tournaments, it's a hell of a lot of fun. And as you said, back in the day, you had these tournaments, you used to go and billet. So you used to go and stay at someone's house. Yeah. So Craig Cumming was one of my first billets who went on to play for New Zealand, and we've been friends ever since. And that's the beauty, of having those sort of tournaments and meeting different people. And I suppose New Zealand's not a big country; it's like a village. And so now, nearly 50, I've got all these mates all around the country who you're in touch with, and that's pretty cool.
In terms of then, playing representative stuff, when did you sort of realise that you? I know your mum mentioned there, obviously, about you always being able to bowl, but when did you realise that you had this? This real raw, this express pace, really.
Well, that didn't really come till probably 24. I know I was a late bloomer in terms of growth. I was quite small.
Right.
And so my last year at high school, I shot up to over 6 foot and all of a sudden put on a couple of yards of pace. And I caught up with Dale Hadley the other day, who was my, at 16, I took a videotape, this old school, to his house. Right. And I'd never seen myself bowl, and looked at it and went, oh, that's terrible. And he looked at it, gave me some tips, and, he ended up being my coach all through my career. Right. But I spoke to Dale about it. He said, I saw you bowl in the last year at high school and thought, oh, who's this kid bowling over there? So for my age, I think at high school I started to bowl pretty sharp. Yeah. And even at sort of under 18s, under 20 level, I was quick for my age. There's no doubt about that. But you wouldn't have termed it express pace. You would have said maybe mid-130s tops. Yeah. It wasn't until I sort of gave up and thought, well, I'm never going to make it. I had a lot of injuries, didn't think I was good enough, went away into the police force. Yeah. And came back, and really I was playing for fun. And one of the things about having the job was injuries don't matter. I have work. So what I'm going to do is just try and bowl as fast as I can. And for whatever reason, I sort of hit that maturity of 23, 24, was probably eating too many half-priced McDonald's and fueled the body up. And all of a sudden I was bowling, heat. And, bowled in a game here in Christchurch. And my coach at the time, Gary McDonald, said, Jesus, that's as quick as I've seen going around. And I'm going to call Richard Hadley, who is the chairman of selectors, and tell him, you bowl heat and he can keep an eye on you. And I was like, crikey, and then I played Dion Nash, and he said the same thing. He's like, bro, that's fast, and it's good quality. Yeah. I suppose those couple of little points like that make a difference for a player like me. It was like, geez, there's some people who have some confidence in you. And then I just thought, well, I'll try and do a little bit more training over the winter, which I did. And then New Zealand 8 was going to India, and Scotty Styris got injured, and they needed a player at late notice, and Dale, who I was working with, rang Richard and said, pick Shane. And they did, and I got a lucky break, and it all sort of snowballed from there.
Wow. In terms of, you said there about, did you always feel then that when you were growing up that you lacked the confidence then?
Yeah, I definitely did. I always felt like as a kid I was sort of the last picked in teams. Right. For whatever reason that was. Maybe, I think as I got older then I didn't do enough work on my fitness into my late teens. And right. So, so that work ethic probably compounded that. Yeah. Once I got to sort of the cricket academy, and Dale was in charge, funny enough, I sort of learnt how to train properly and the sort of effort that was required to get into that sort of shape. But definitely lacked confidence. The confidence probably came through the police force. That was a highly stressful job where you were put into really uncomfortable positions, and you just sort of learnt to deal with it and bluff your way through it. And after a while working there, you sort of got an inner confidence. Oh, I can handle myself here. Yeah. And then once I got into Test cricket, it was the same thing. You knew you were out of your depth, but you sort of just handled it. Yeah. And that really helped me. And plus, I got a little bit of early success. And I think every player, it doesn't matter what grade you're playing, you're looking for that performance where you feel like you're part of the team. I sort of belong here now, and I'm good enough. And that sort of came reasonably early for me, which helped. Yeah.
In terms of that early success, breaking into the side, was this obviously I've read a few bits of, some advice obviously Chris Cairns gave you and stuff, but was he sort of like quite a big influence breaking into the international stage?
Huge. I loved playing with him because he was such a great player. I looked around, and even making the domestic team, Canterbury team here, there were 7 New Zealand players playing for Canterbury. So to make that team when everyone was available for selection was a big deal. It was like, geez, I've made a team that's chock-a-block, and that gave. And I played a final with all those internationals here, which was fantastic. And then once I got into that team, the backing of Stephen was massive. Stephen Fleming, the confidence he gave me, and then Kenzie was like, mate, because I was always thinking, how many games am I going to be here? This is probably my last game, and I'll be here a handful of games. And he was like, nah, if you're good enough to get here, just set the bar high. Who knows what you can reach? And I never really thought about that. And then had that series in Aussie where I got a whole heap of wickets, which helped. And then it was like, okay, I can do this. So the whole mindset shifted to that, right, I'm going to try and be the best player I can. Yeah. And I was lucky, all timings of injuries, and then the game turned professional the year after, and things like that enabled me just to commit to that sort of stuff. So there was some really helpful advice along the way, which, now I'm in coaching, you realise the influence that a couple of key points and things can matter to a player, and it can have a significant impact.
Yeah, definitely. Making your Test debut against Australia, you mentioned there from a confidence perspective, that was, arguably one of the greatest Test sides of all time. It may not have gone to plan from you, from your perspective. How did you develop from, you mentioned there starting out the lack of confidence, but what did you take post the two Tests back, the first two, that sort of give you that confidence and that sort of like belief of being able to mix it with the best?
Yeah, it's interesting. You look back, I sort of survived on a lot of bowling. Like, as I said, because I was working, 10-hour shifts in the cops, you did a little bit of training, but you were nowhere near ready to handle those guys who are all on $1 million a year, because they would tell you what they're earning. So, I loved it because you're playing, I was out on the field going, holy, look at these blokes. I've watched all these guys on TVs, they're superstars. And the banter and the sledging that they'd dish out. I mean, I was used to that because I was a cop, but it was great. To me, they were just great stories. I realised that I was quick enough to cause some problems. I didn't have a slower ball, but, I just thought to myself, geez, if I was actually completely prepared and fitter and had these different things in my arsenal, then what would it look like? I know I'm getting smacked around a bit, but I still feel like I'm competing.
Yeah.
And so that was like, okay, there's still plenty left in the tank. And then, as I said, came back for the one-day series and got a whole play South African Aussie, got a whole heap of wickets, and that really elevated that to, geez, there's no reason why I can't make a career out of playing cricket here. So, I was lucky. I felt like I was lucky to play in an era of all those great players, batsmen, the Pontings, the Laras, the Tendulkars, every team you played against had these superstars. And it was just fun. You sort of just wanted to tick them off the list of trying to get them out. Yeah. And, even though it was intimidating, you sit there going, crikey, look who's to come. It was, you get confidence from other people's success. And as I said, realising that you can compete and cause a few problems. Yeah.
In terms of obviously like what you mentioned there about the police force side of things, and then obviously you realise the becoming full-time side of things. What was the big steps that you did, maybe fitness wise and stuff, to sort of help you maintain that pace that you sort of reputation that you had, really?
I think one of those, there's a couple of things I did. So I think you have to have a real honest conversation with yourself to go, like, what am I good at, but where are the real gaps, real weaknesses in my game? And like, I was a power athlete. I could run quick. But aerobically I really struggled. I'm not a natural runner or athlete like that. So I realised I had to do a lot of work on my aerobic fitness, which isn't a lot of fun sometimes when you're doing that grind. So then it was like, well, I can't do this on my own. So who's going to help me to get there? So Gilbert Anoku ended up being the sort of sports site general manager of the All Blacks. He'd been involved in cricket. So I used him as a bit of a mentor to sit down and go, okay, let's plot out 6 weeks, what a 6-week training block would look like. And then it was someone to go back to. So I sort of had a level of accountability. If I didn't do it and went back to Gilbert and said, I haven't done it, he would, give me a kick in the backside. Yeah. And then there were certain other things I wanted to do. So, what did my recovery look like? So I went and I'm paid for some massage. So I always believe one of my philosophies is put some skin in the game. Like, if I start paying for stuff, it's going to be more to me rather than just being handed out all the time. So I started to invest in myself a little bit more. And then I just went about, getting out of bed every day and treating it like a job, really, and just working hard. And I suppose through sheer willpower and working, that's where my confidence then came from. That when I played, then success to me wasn't a surprise. It was like, I work harder than anyone, so I'm going to be successful. And then every season or whatever, I would then look at what I'd done and tweak it to try and make it better. So I'd never be the same. But what can I add to it to make myself a better player? So that's basically, and then it's just getting out of bed and getting the work done. And it's the same message I give to my son now. I tell him it's not about how talented you are, it's about how hard you work. And it's just, you just got to work hard, have a plan and work hard every day. And if you do that, you might not make it, but there's a lot of lessons and good stuff that'll come out of that as well, and you'll give yourself a pretty good chance.
Yeah, of course. And it's that accountability that you mentioned there, by taking the responsibility. It's something that me and Kieran have spoke about so much in terms of on this podcast. It's about accountability and giving yourself that best possible opportunity to go achieve what you're going to go and achieve, really.
Yeah, and I think also the other thing is, as a teenager, I was a bit lazy and didn't get off my bum and go and do the stuff that I wanted. So now you're trying to find that balance as a parent and coach to your own son to go, he's going, I want to play cricket. And I'm going, well, if you want to play cricket, you're going to need a kick in the bum, Everyone needs just someone to bump them along. And I'm always going to them, have you done your gym work? Have you done this? When we go to training, are you prepared for your training? Have you thought about what you're going to do? Yeah. Why are we at training today? It's just all those little things that you have to do as a professional. And sometimes he looks at me as if to say, would you just shut up? But then after he reflects and then comes back and goes, I know why you're doing it. And I think that's the thing I look back on through my playing career is the honest conversations and sometimes the bit of a spray that you copped from a coach where at the time you hated it, but really you needed it and you appreciated it. And I think it's sometimes in hindsight, and I know that's one of my coaching philosophies now. I tell the players that I'm going to tell you what I think. You can take it as what you want, but I think in the long run, I've got your best interests at heart and I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't care. So I think those things are important.
Yeah. I would quickly. I know. Sorry, I'm going to hell with myself as well. I'm not bringing Kieran in, but I've just got one question in terms of the going into the World Cup that's in South Africa with. There was a lot of talk around yourself and Brett Lee and Shoaib Akhtar. Did you feel anything going into that, or even when you were there, about that sort of competition between the three of you, or was it just a case of you were focused on achieving what you were going to go out there and do, really?
Yeah, I think I always thought that they were a yard quicker than I were. They were at 160. They had 5K on me, so I didn't think I was ever going to get. There are days where you thought, geez, that'd be interesting if I had the gun on me, what that would look like. But I always felt they were quicker than I were. I just sort of sat just underneath them. So no, for me, it was just you have your own expectations about what you wanted to do. Yeah. And sometimes you've just got to. The time sometimes you struggle is you just get too focused on outcome stuff. But when you just come back to, just thinking, if I bowl well, everything will take care of itself. So it was just the other thing that came to me was it wasn't about. There are always days, and Kieran will know this is you're not playing that well, but you just sort of got to bluff your way through it. So I'm a big believer in body language as a bowler. Like I was the opening bowler. I had to set the tone. So whether I was bowling well or not, there was no way that the team would see me not running in or a batsman wouldn't see me charging in. Yeah. And I always knew. Whether it be batting or bowling, it takes one ball and everything can change. Everything clicks and away you go. And so I just had that mindset that I'll just keep steaming in. And then all of a sudden you just go, it's starting to feel good now. Yeah. And then, so I didn't want to be a fair weather player. When you're playing great, I'm up and about. And if I'm not, I'm dropping my shoulders. And I coached and I talked to players about that you've got to be consistent in the way that you appear, whether you're going great or things aren't going great. That's really important to me.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, for me, I think it's very interesting I'm an absolute cricket aficionado. Like, I love everything cricket. So I think from your generation onwards, you could see a drastic change in New Zealand cricket to what I think right now personally has been a golden generation. So what would you say that you can sort of put a finger on and say this has changed and has led to New Zealand having this success, obviously being in a country where rugby is such a big force and you probably lose 80-90% of the actual sporting talent to a different sport?
Yeah, that's a great question. I certainly think the professionalism side's helped. Like the money, we're not super paid, like especially at domestic level. It's decent, and I think that's slowly allowed players, to treat the game like a job. So you're bringing in now 18, 19-year-olds who are learning what it's like to be a professional. Yeah. I think there's no doubt we've had talent, we've had a batch time, but there's some really good talent still coming through here, and I think there's been some good coaching, some really good programs put in place. They brought some A tours back, and there's been some planning and succession planning. So Rachin Ravindra is the classic case. I remember taking the New Zealand A tour as a head coach to the UAE, and they picked him. And he hadn't played a first-class game, and they're going, this kid's going to be a proper player. We're going to take him on this tour for experience. We're going to play him, and it's going to be part of his development. And 4 years later, he's a superstar now. And there's little things like that where they've run winter squad programs where they've brought in groups of players, put them under pressure, worked them really hard, done it for a couple of years, got their fitness up, and I think you reap the benefits a few years on. We've certainly had some outstandingly talented players. There's no doubt, the Williamsons, the Taylors, there's been this big block, which I think when they all go, it's going to be challenging. And I think a team like Sri Lanka, you're seeing that now. This block of players for 15, and they're finding it pretty tough. And I think New Zealand will. But if you've got decent systems in place and you're doing those programs well, you'll still be competitive. And it's sort of lingering that New Zealand. We've done it for a while and it's still lingering and we're still going pretty good. And there's some pretty good players coming through as well. So I'm hopeful that we'll continue to be competitive and can, still lift a couple of trophies.
And how have you managed to produce so many fast bowlers? Because it's one thing I absolutely hate about coming to New Zealand when you've got, obviously Wagner's going to live on top of your helmet. You've got Adam Mills and the likes that are just bowling so quickly. How is it that you guys are able to produce such quick bowlers?
Yeah, it's an interesting. I think what you get over here, there's a big thing around balance. Balance is better, and they talk a lot about doing multi-sports, which it's really hard because in a country like India, all you do is cricket, so you get very good at playing cricket. Yeah. But what you produce here is very good athletes. Guys who move well, dynamic, field well. That's why New Zealand's always a good fielding team. They're really good athletic team. And the wickets are pretty flat. I know it looks like when you come here you play on green tops, but they usually last for about a day and then they're flat. The wickets don't turn, so you need something about you to be successful. You got to do something with the ball, and it's spinners who struggle here. Generally, us, you look at the home record of our spinners, it's pretty hard work. So, and there's a bit of wind, mate. Someone's got to truck into that breeze. You got to It's a horrible place to bowl. It's a windy place. So, and I think that's just the way we are. We understand our own conditions and there's I think that we've developed a bit more of a hardness and more of a confidence in ourselves. We're always seen as the underdogs and the dark horse. Whenever you talked about tournaments, I don't think New Zealand's seen like that anymore. Now we're genuine contenders, whatever the competition is, and I think you can sort of see that in the way that we play. That sort of confidence is that Australia have always had. It's sort of starting to come down into us, and we're sort of a little bit more like that. Probably still got a little bit of a mental block, I think, against Australia, but everyone else we're pretty competitive against.
Yeah. What do you think about your time playing in and against the West Indies? Because I can remember the early 2000s. I was like, why is he still bowling? Why is he still getting wickets? And when will this spell end?
Yeah, I loved touring the West Indies. It was hot. Like the wickets were pretty flat, so it was challenging. When you got guys like Gale and Lara, Chanderpaul, again, you'd look down that lineup and go far out. This is a proper team, and I grew up like watching the Ambrose, Walsh, Bishop, in Australia, winning series, that great series over there. So I always had a huge admiration for the West Indies, and even down at Lancaster Park when it was still standing, watching Ambrose in the nets bowl one bouncer that flew out over the top of the net into the car park straight through a car window, and just go, wow, imagine facing this stuff. And I remember facing guys like Cameron Cappy and and Darren Powell, big guys getting bounced, thinking, crikey, this ain't much fun. So no, I loved it. There were certain players who I quite enjoyed bowling to in the West Indies, but I loved the flamboyance. I loved the shot making. I loved the way the West Indies players carried themselves. I love that they bowled bouncers. And I love the crowd, the energy of the crowd and the music, and some of the wives from our team up in the crowd getting grinded up against. I remember that. And I like the rum too, so it was pretty good.
On the impact of the IPL, obviously I know that you've been working with IPL teams, etc., for a long time now. What do you think that has impacted? Like, how do you think that has impacted the world game, and specifically? Obviously, New Zealand being a smaller nation like the West Indies, how do you think that has impacted New Zealand's cricket?
I think you see a number of our players go to the subcontinent not so spooked by it because they've got experience over there. Mm-hmm. You start to, I think, build up a little bit more of a tolerance to the heat too. New Zealand can get hot, but not the same sort of level of heat and humidity that's overseas. So I think every time you go back there, and you sort of build up a little bit more of a tolerance to it. I'm in awe, really. I look at the shot making now. Batting is crazy, and some of the scores you're seeing in T20, 280 and stuff like that, it's out of control. And I've always thought that bowling is just a little bit off the pace. Like batting's been so innovative, just so fearless. If the ball's there, it goes. Without a doubt. If it's first ball in your slot, you whack it. And bowling sort of, using the analysis, but also just trying to develop a few more skills to catch up and how you apply that. And I think that's generally what happens is the batting sort of goes ahead and you hope that the bowling catches up to it. Still think it's a wee way to go, and I still think, you almost got to think about the grounds now. Some of them are just too small for the modern game, and how do you rebuild them or make them a little bit better? But I just think that general exposure from, you'll have maybe 10, 11 Kiwis playing different stuff around the world, and you're getting exposed to different coaching, different players. You're involved in conversations in the changing room. You're seeing how guys go about their work, and you take parts of that, whether you're a coach or a player, and you add it to your own game, and it's only going to make you better. I mean, that's the same for every team in the world, but I think when you're don't quite have the resource that a New Zealand has, and you get the opportunity to grab that makes a big difference for us.
Yeah.
And just one more question before you come back in, Jordan. How do you think the ICC could help smaller nations to stay competitive and not lose their best players? Because obviously they're not able to pay players the fee that they can get playing in all these franchise leagues, etc.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's the one they're still trying to work out, isn't it? I would love to see just specific windows put in. So the IPL obviously has a specific window. If it's the CPL, then maybe you've got to play that alongside the 100. So there's maybe 3 blocks in the year where the competitions run. I think having coached, it's a frustration for me when players come out of one competition and jump halfway into another one. Like there's people coming and going. I just think you commit to a competition and you're in that competition. And so, and then it's up to that competition to attract the best players either through the location or the money or whatever it may be. And I think if you had certain blocks that, January was Big Bash and April and May was PSL and IPL, and August was CPL and the 100, something along those lines. And then you could fill the gaps with international cricket. And then rather than sort of I think if the T20 competition spread across the year, it's going to make it more difficult and challenging for the smaller nations, particularly their good players. So, yeah, that's. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. I think Test cricket. I mean, I still love Test cricket, but I think it's in a little bit of trouble. I think, I think people like watching the Ashes, and those India, Australia will be great. But I know also, and the West Indies will have the same probably problem as New Zealand is if New Zealand are playing Bangladesh or Sri Lanka, we're losing money to put on Test cricket, and so it's more profitable playing white ball cricket, and that's a real challenge.
Yeah. I want to sort of dive back into obviously the transition, obviously, the injuries that you picked up and things like that. When did you start to think about obviously transitioning into coaching, and was it always something that you wanted to go into post your playing career?
Yeah, well, so I think like I had the back surgery in 2004, and I was lucky. I had niggles and bits and bobs after that, but my back's been fine ever since. I always loved watching cricket. I mean, as a kid, I watched every ODI. You sort of look now and go, geez, I sat down for 7 hours, and scores of 200. So it wasn't exhilarating cricket back in the day, No. But I watched it. I just loved it. I watched everything. And even when I played, I wasn't one of those guys who went away and didn't watch. I watched, and I was watching what other people were doing. And so I suppose that was sort of a natural affinity to coaching, is watching and analysing. Even being a policeman, I suppose, is something about helping people. So it was always something that I wanted to do. And I think with bowling, there was, especially analysis, I thought there was a gap in analysis, and obviously then player management, having had injuries that I had. Yeah. How could I tie together those two things? And I was really clear about a couple of things that I wanted to do there. The biggest thing is then how do you get an opportunity? And I was lucky. I came out of playing and then got asked to go as sort of a bowling coach to South Africa for the Champions Trophy, the club-based one. And then Gary Stead asked me to go with the women's team to a World Cup. Right. Came back and did some more domestic cricket, generally in blocks and sort of franchise, like in T20 blocks. Right. And then, and did a little bit of commentary, because it was quite good for me to see the other side. The players often can sit there and bag the media. Yeah. And so then it was an opportunity to sit on the other side and go, okay, what does it look like? What do they really think? How do they go about their job? So I did 2 of those. And then after I was coaching for a little bit and doing some work at a winter squad back in New Zealand, it was sort of the New Zealand job came up, and it was like, I didn't feel like I was quite ready. Right. But you never really are sometimes. Yeah. It was, I knew how I wanted, how I could see the job. I just needed the hands-on experience of getting in. So I applied and got it. And really your coaching sort of developed from there. So I love it. I love the coaching stuff. I think as you do assistant coach and head coach roles, you really define, what the coaching means to you, how you see the game being played, all those sorts of things. And I think being around the modern players and the different generations obviously see things differently, but I just love working with people and you get the opportunity to share in their success and see them get better. It's fantastic.
And who are the coaches that you worked with that you've sort of the biggest influences that had on you, some of the takeaways that you've taken from being coached and then obviously now rolling out to coaching yourself?
You take things from every coach. There's things that coaches do and don't do that I've enjoyed and bring into my own coaching. So John Bracewell I really enjoyed. Yeah. He was pretty tough. I always found him really interesting to talk to him, was really clear about what he wanted, but he was one coach who would give me a kick in the arse. So I remember getting a hat-trick against Australia and obviously being a little bit cock-a-hoop, came off, and he just told me, the hat-trick's nice, but you bowl pulp, basically. You bowl rubbish. I was like, whoa. And I was the sort of player who took that with, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you next game. And so, and he was right. I didn't bowl very well. So, and so that was one of the things is a lot of, when I got to a status of being a top quality international bowler, a lot of coaches said, he knows what he's doing and I won't coach him. And so they left me alone. And actually, I didn't enjoy that. I took the opposite. And my coaching career has always been, I'm going to coach the best players the hardest. Because A, they're going to win you the games, but B, that you challenge them and try and get every bit out of them. And I wanted that, and so that's my coaching philosophy. And I believe that then if you do that to the top players, they'll actually filter that down to the younger players. They'll help, they'll push, rather than the other way around. And then little things like along the way, like when Mike Hesson was coaching, things around continuity of selection. You look at things like that and the way they go about things. And then man management, Dennis Aberhart was a guy who gave me a lot of confidence when I came into the team, just putting my arm around me, that sort of thing. So you look at all of that and go, they're things that are really important. And then you've got to understand your own strengths. I think I'm a pretty outgoing guy, but I'm also an introvert. I find being around people all the time really sapping. I need time on my own.
Right.
And so how you then manage yourself to be, because the coach has got all these people and staff to manage, but how can I have the energy to do that, and where can I best put that, and who are the people who can complement me if I'm in charge? So the assistant coach role, where the bowling coach is easier because you can sort of be a little bit more jovial. You're in on the banter. Players will come to you, they'll talk to you, they'll complain to you. You can sort of feed that back quietly to a coach. You can have that really strong relationship, whereas the head coach, sometimes that's tougher. The players know you're selecting them, and you're managing a different group and doing both roles. I love both roles, and it gives you a perspective of what's important. So as an assistant coach, what do I need from my head coach? I need that backing, let me do my job, don't micromanage me. And the same thing from a head coach role is to, you want to give your assistant a say, you want them to know what's happening, or that have an input into what's going on with the team, those sort of things. So doing both those roles have been really valuable.
Yeah. But in terms of working with the likes of part of the England team at times, so you've had Broad, you've had Anderson, you've had we worked with Tim Southey and Trent Bolt and Bumrah in the Mumbai Indians. What out of those 5 top quality bowlers, what's the common trait that you find within the top end bowlers that you've worked with?
Competitiveness. There's no doubt that people are competitive. I think they generally want to get better. I think you have it. There's a degree of stubbornness because I've had so much success. So this is the way I do things. So there's definitely that, and you can understand that. I was like that. When you've got to a level of success, those guys there's a way and a method in which they do things. Yeah. My thing is I'm not trying to change it. I'm just trying to find something else. It might be a field, it might be a delivery, whatever it may be. I'm looking for something that'll make you better. And so then how do I do that? That's why I use a lot of information with guys, just to put that in front of them and say, hey, did you know this? Yeah. And sometimes guys will take a little while to try stuff. So I remember someone like Marley, he lost his pace, lost a little bit of pace at the back end of his career. And I said to him, at the death, why don't you try coming around the wicket? You bowl way out here, come and hit the back of the field. I think it'd be reasonably challenging. And he was a few years at Mumbai, he was like, nah. And then what happens is he started to get hit, and then once he got hit was starting to get under the pump. I just offer it again. What have you thought about this? And Mihaela, who was the coach, said, "Look, I'll have a word to him too." So he not only use you, but Mihaela said, "Well, why don't you try this?" And then he tried it and had a little bit of success. So I don't expect players to go, when I go, "What about this?" them to go, "Yep, I'm just going to get into it." I'm pragmatic enough to go, I'll present the idea, they can make a choice, but I'm also understand that at some point, if things aren't going well, a good player will revisit it, and I can then bring it back in and go, "Have you thought about this again?" There's little things like Bolty I remember having Bolty having a short, fine leg, and when he started, and going to him and saying, for 2 years the ball hasn't gone there. Why is he there? You could use him over the other side of the field. And he thought about it, and then moved it, and then had some success doing that. So it's just using information so that guys can see the reasoning rather than just going as an opinion. I think you should do this. Is having something to back it up.
Yeah.
So it's not just it's not just a subjective. It's objective.
Yeah.
And then allowing the player to make a decision, and then just always revisiting stuff like that.
Yeah, and I suppose, like you mentioned there, the timing in terms of delivering that input as well. So that's really.
Yeah, and then those players, mate, what I love about the Bumrahs and those guys, they go to training, they're really clear about what they want to practice. Like, they're on. They don't go there, they don't muck around. They know what they want to achieve. They're working on specific things. They're getting themselves into that mode, and as I said, they're hugely competitive guys. And I think that competitiveness, if you look at that competitiveness and that heart, I call it. And Powell mentioned Neil Wagner. Wags is like 5'7". He's not the fastest bowler in the world. Swings it a little bit, but you would never look at him as physically and go, he's going to be one of the, he's going to be a great test bowler. But what he had was a massive ticker, and he worked out what worked. And you can't beat a bowler with a big heart. He's a captain's dream, and an impact of a bowler like that in your bowling group too, it's inspiring when you've got bowlers like that. And I think that's a characteristic of the great bowlers, is they're always running in. They're 40 overs in, they're still running in, they're still competitive, and that's what makes them great.
You mentioned there about like heart and determination and stuff. As a coach, do you think you can help develop people's sort of determination and grittiness as such?
Probably, yeah. Don't ask me the secret sauce. I would have, as I said, I would have considered myself someone who was lazy and soft when I was younger. So I think it's, and so you can easily write people off to go, he's a bit soft, or whatever. And then you also get things like, you've got if someone's carrying a niggle, which, bowlers often do, and you give them, do you think you can play? And a player says, I can play. People see that as being tough. If a player says, I don't, people can think that's soft. Yeah. So you've got to be really careful with the mentality around that. Do I think? Yeah, I think the real deep competitiveness, I don't know about that. I think some people just have that. And I think, I watch a lot of the sports docos, whether it be Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan, these guys. See, they just have that. Something a little bit different in terms of the ultimate competitiveness, and guys like Ricky Ponting, having worked with him, he's got that, like, super competitive. I don't know whether you can really coach that. I think that's something that's sort of innate. Yeah. That's not to say everyone's not competitive, but that level is, it's a different level. I think it's just that then it just comes down to that work ethic and just doing those little things. Yeah. A lot of times you hear when I'm coaching now, people talking about fun. The players, we've got to have fun. It's not fun. Like, a lot of it's not fun. To me, the playing was fun and success was fun, and everything I did, that's what I wanted to enjoy. But the going out and, running up hills now, it's not fun. It's horrible. A lot of times it hurts. And doing it every day is not fun. There's plenty of days where you go, I don't really want to do this, but you just got to if you want to be good, you got to get out and get it done. Yeah. And the purpose is to have the fun when you're playing, because you're ready to rock. So, yeah, that's the difference between some of those good players, is that they just go and get that stuff done. They do it day to day, and then they have that hard-nosed mentality when they play. And I think of someone like Jacques Callis. When I played him, he was one of the greats, because every time he batted, he had this tempo and swagger about that. You knew you were going to get nothing from him. Yeah, and there was, it's disheartening. Like, here he goes again, and just was in his own bubble. And it must be like that facing a Smith or a Williamson when they get in. Yeah, they don't look like getting out. And so that's that mentality, that bubble and hard nosed sort of attitude that they have. And I think you can develop it. And I suppose it's just having that little bit of success and being pushed, I think, a little bit by coaches that you think will get you there.
Yeah, because again, only playing at an amateur standard, I always felt that sometimes with myself, the accountability came a little bit later than I would have liked it to. When I look back now, me and Kieran were speaking about a podcast we were listening to yesterday, and we were talking about accountability and various bits. And I felt that when I was a bit immature towards certain bits, and I felt like you mentioned there about being weak. I wasn't necessarily weak. I just didn't really take that much responsibility. And then as I got older, I realised the importance of preparation, doing certain things. Obviously, at a much different level to both of you guys, but the same thing in terms of how about going about a game. And I think that, from my perspective, it's a bit more from the maturity side of things, more so than the weak thing that you mentioned there.
And one of the challenges for coaches now is a lot of the thing is that there's a lot of talk about man management, or just about keeping people happy. You can easily coach for your job. You just want to keep everybody happy, and if I keep everybody happy, then I'm going to keep my job, rather than, to me, the first job of a coach is to make people better. Give them real clarity about how the game, but I've got to make them better. And the only way I'm going to make them better is perhaps challenging them on some certain aspects of their game. Now, some players are going to respond and some aren't. The ones who aren't probably aren't going to be any good anyway, because they've got a closed mindset, and then, they're not going to develop to a level that they perhaps could. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, because if you genuinely care about your players, then why would you just ignore them and not offer them anything? When you can see some obvious things that you think could help them in their game. Yeah. So it's, as a coach, I always think, you've got to develop that trust. You've got to know that they've got their best interest at heart. You've got to be honest with them. You've got to expect the feedback back from the players with things that they don't like. So some way that they can feed back that, look, we're not really enjoying what you're doing here, and give them a say in the way things are going. But that doesn't mean you can't avoid those hard conversations.
No.
And you have to sit down, and I think one of the things that was always said to me as a player is you can't point people out when they're not doing well. I don't agree with that. I think everybody knows in a cricket team when somebody's screwed up. Everybody knows it. Why not just get it out in the open? And we're not doing it to point the finger at you as the person. We're trying to say something so that as a team we don't make the same mistakes. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. We mentioned about the different franchises and stuff, and obviously with you being involved in the IPL, and you've been involved with Australia and the BBL, bits in America. What are the biggest takeaways that you've taken from sort of each of these franchise tournaments, or is it not necessarily each separate takeaways, but how's that helped you develop as a coach, playing in sort of different countries, and especially with, I suppose, America as well more recently?
The beauty of the doing the little blocks is you as a coach, you can sort of try things yourself. So there's times where you've gone, okay, let's do the bowling meeting like this today. For this tournament, I might allow all the players to do their own warm-ups. There's certain things you can try and go, and I'm going to see what this looks like. And I think I've done certain things and then walked away and gone, you know what, that's just not me. I don't think that's the way I want to do things. And I would have known that if I hadn't tried. Yeah. So and I think as a player, as players, you've got to allow players to experiment in the nets and go, there's some things I don't have the answers to, but you've got to be able to practice something, try something. And if you've tried it for a while, then take the confidence to put that into a game. And I say that to players, if you're trying something, I want you to try it. You've got my full backing. We've talked about it, we've practiced it, go and do it. And I think as a coach, I take the same thing. I'm not going to get it right all the time as a coach. I'm not going to say the right things. I'm not going to do the right things. But I've got to still be able to try some certain things to see if it's, if it works, if it doesn't work, or if it's me. And that's what I've really enjoyed about that. As I said, I've done some things where I've gone, okay, let's try just a meeting with the captain and the keeper and not the bowlers, or as I said, I have just allowed the players to do the warm-ups, and you walk away from it at the end of the tournament, I'm not going to do that again. So you sort of refine your own coaching style. Yeah. Because I think as a coach, you've always got, like a player, you've always got to try to improve yourself. So you've got to be really clear, and then you develop your own philosophy around the game. This is how I think, especially in T20, this is how I want the game played. This is the way I see it. These are the important things, I think, the things that we can keep coming back to as a team and going, did we do these things? Yeah. And if we did and we lose, it's okay. But at least you've got something to fall back on. Yeah, definitely. Kieran, do I bring you back in with anything at all?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to hear Bundy's thoughts on, obviously, the upcoming New Zealand-England series, and what can we expect from his good friend McCullum's baseball?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a high tempo series with the bat. I think the tosses in Wellington and Christchurch are important because everybody bowls. They're grassy. The ball moves around for sort of a day, for a session and a half, 2 sessions, and then it gets flat. So your best opportunity to win the game is in the first day of the test match. I think the wickets will then get really flat, and I think both batting lineups will enjoy. England will enjoy batting here, especially coming off Pakistan. I think New Zealand will win 1-0. I think we'll see sort of 4 or 5 runs and over, but big scores, and teams maybe struggle to bowl each other out. But I think New Zealand will. What I notice about England is their batting lineup's dangerous, but they just tend to have test matches or sessions in test matches where they just lose it, and they lose the test match based on a big collapse. And I just think that's going to happen at some stage in the series against New Zealand. They haven't quite managed to eliminate. They remind me of New Zealand of the past. That's what we would do. We'd play pretty well and then just have a session where we would fall away, and the test match, all of a sudden you'd lose by heaps. And England are sort of, I think they're a hugely talented batting lineup, and I just don't know whether their bowling will be strong enough to knock New Zealand over twice here. Whereas I think New Zealand's bowling in their own conditions will just outdo the England bowling, I think,
Tim Southey's announced his retirement. What's your take on his career and his impact on New Zealand cricket?
Yeah, Tim, great player. I mean, I roomed with him in 2009 on an A tour. I just come back from the Indian Cricket League, and he had just played a test match or two, and we roomed together in India. And he's a beauty of a character. The nickname's the Pest because he's annoying and he'll give you plenty of grief and stuff. Still does. And I love his sense of humour. All those things I talked about before about those players, that's what Tim is. He's always been fit, always been lean. He's durable. He's smart, goes about his work, wants to get better, understood when his pace dropped a little bit from the 140s early to 130, that had to use the crease more. You can see the development of his game. And he's 15 wickets off 400, which is a hell of an effort. So I'm really hoping that he has a blinding series and would get to Hamilton's the last test, he plays it and gets that 400th wicket. Would be something special. I knew it was a goal of his. He really wanted it. So like a real alpha male, like a real leader in the New Zealand team, leads from the front, respected, and he'll be missed. But it's good that they're good to keep picking with guys like O'Rourke and maybe Nathan Smith coming into the team. It's great to play alongside guys like that. That's what it was for me, to play alongside a Chris Cairns and a Dion. These senior pros, you see their attitude and their mentality and work ethic. And he's been a massive figure in the best period of cricket in New Zealand ever.
Yeah. And
is this the last we're going to see of Kane Williamson? Obviously been struggling with injuries a lot over the past 2-3 years.
Yeah, the boys get to 35, don't they, mate? They get those old man injuries, the groins and the calves, and poor old Joss is having those injuries as well for England, and you see that. I don't think so. I think he'll want 10,000 test runs. That's my gut feel. I think there's stuff he'll still want to achieve, Kane, in test cricket. I think he's obviously going to South Africa coming up, and and so he's cashing in a little bit, and so he should. He's been such a great player. Yeah. But I think he'll play for a couple more years. I would love him to play all the way up to, I think New Zealand play Australia in 4 tests in a couple of years' time. Okay. And I think if you look at the New Zealand team now and then you look at Australia where they'll be in 2 years, they'll have lost a lot of their bowlers and a few of their big batters might be out. It could be prime time for New Zealand, and Kane might be 36, 37, but there's no doubt he's a good enough player. So I'd be hoping he'll play for another couple of years. I'd love to see him be the first Kiwi to get that 10,000 runs. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
And your thoughts on the Border Gavaskar series? My last question.
Yep, I think India are going to find it tough going. I think there's obviously with Rowett's not going to be there, Gill's injured. I think New Zealand has probably given them a bit of a wake-up call, really. I mean, we just completely outgunned them in their own. And I think Australia, and I watched a bit of the A series, Australia versus India, and their batters found it a little bit challenging when the ball was going around. And not that any batsman doesn't, but I think depth of bowling for Australia, I think they'll overwhelm India. I think they'll win 3-0. That's my gut feel. I think they'll be too good in the series, and I know India have got some talented backups, but if they get an injury to Bumrah, they're in real trouble. But I just don't see them winning this series. I think Australia will win comfortably.
No. Well, I think it's the perfect time to wrap. So thank you so much for joining me and Kieran tonight. It's been a privilege. This morning for you. And thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. And thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure, boys. Good to see you again, Pally.
Nice to see you. Lovely catching up.
See you, Ray. Good.
Thank you for joining us on the PowettPlay Podcast, hosted by Kieran Powell and Jordan Shannon. We hope you enjoyed this immersive dive into the world of cricket and business, exploring the unique experiences and perspectives of players past and present, alongside those invaluable insights into intriguing business themes that transcend beyond the boundaries of sporting heroics. Be sure to set your reminders on your Alexa or Google Home device, or we won't tell anyone if you still use those paper calendar things from a bygone era. Join us next time for more inspiring dialogue with scintillating minds on the PowettPlay Podcast.